Welcome back to the Rules of Engagement. Before I jump to analyzing game number 3, let me remind you, if you miss any of our content, Rules of Engagement, WCS matches, MLG Dallas matches, whatever you miss, it's all on youtube.com/official MLGSE2. For example, you notice I'm skipping analysis of game number 2. If you want to check out that game, there was some cool stuff happen. It was a bit of a long game. Go ahead, just find it on YouTube. Type in Killer vs. Thorzain. Go look up, MLG Winter Championship at Dallas playlist. You'll find it all there. So, a lot of cool stuff on YouTube. Go ahead, check it out. Everything there is free 1080p content. So, a lot of great content. We make stuff every day. If you ever are thinking that you might not find the best stream on, look at our YouTube site, because there's a lot of great stuff on our YouTube as well. So now going on to analyzing Thorzain versus Killer, game number 3. A couple things I want to talk about are going to be aggression versus aggression. So two people open up very aggressive builds, what typically happens. Playing from ahead, if you have an advantage, a couple things to keep in mind to maintain that advantage. And also dealing with mass Widowmines as a Zerg player. Now, there's a lot of you Zergs out there who probably run into a lot of Widowmine play. And some tips and tricks on how to deal with an opponent who really goes very heavy into those Widowmines. So now we're going to jump into the game again at the 6-minute mark here. And the first thing I want to talk about is aggression versus aggression. So if you look at Killer's build, what's he doing? Well, he's building 7 roaches at the 6-minute mark. That's a very aggressive build, 21 drones. And then he's going to go into droning afterwards, so it's not like it's super all in, but he definitely wants to get some damage done with this set of roaches. On the other hand, let's look at what Thorzain's doing. Thorzain still hasn't built a 3rd command center yet. In fact, he's actually going 2 barracks, a very fast starport, getting stim fast, reactor on marine. So he's doing a very aggressive build as well. He's basically rushing medevacs and bio. Very, very fast. There's no E-base yet and no 3rd command center, so this is considered an aggressive build as well. If both players are doing aggressive builds, typically the guy who attacks is going to be behind. The defender has advantage. As we can see here, of course, Killer, he has a temporary food advantage because he invested so many roaches this early, but the roaches can't get anything done because Thorzain invested in an aggressive build, so he had more units than average, but then the units had the defender's advantage by being closer to his rally point, having to bunker, SVs to repair. We can see here, of course, Killer, units lost, didn't quite get it done, and going forward, equal worker count versus a Terran is not where Zerg wants to be at. So Thorzain has a bit of an advantage now going forward because both players open aggressively, and if both players open aggressively, typically the defender has advantage. It's similar to PvP, you both go 4-gate. The defender typically has a small advantage there. Although, if you get contained and they're not really being as aggressive, if they're probing behind it, you could be in trouble. So it really depends on who's being more aggressive as well. But if you're both being equally aggressive in your builds, then the defender has advantage. Thorzain trying to get some damage done on the counter drop, and maybe if he waited for a stim... I really like this drop, because he didn't want to wait for a stim. He wanted to get some damage done early. And he trades well, right? We can see here he's trading well. As long as the medevacs get out fine and he keeps trading evenly, he's going to be in great shape because he's forcing Killer not to be able to drone up, right? And it's not like he's losing units because he can just pull out anytime he wants. So, great play. And this is where we start talking about playing from ahead. So, if you're in Thorzain's perspective, you're ahead from the openings, right? If you're ahead, what you really want to do is you want to stay on top of macro, right? Because you don't want to just fall behind from being out macroed. So, Thorzain's doing it. He's on the 3rd command center, getting double E-base, making sure he won't fall behind a macro. Then the other thing you want to do is you want to be very careful not to lose units unnecessarily. Because as long as you stay on top of your macro and you keep your army alive, you don't take any really bad trades, what's going to happen is your opponent is going to have to macro hard to keep up with you. And that's where you use the army advantage, right? Like for TVZ, the great thing to do is if you're Terran, you can say, okay, I'll macro up, and right now I can't build that big of an army because I'm still investing in extra production facilities through base upgrades. But I know I'm ahead right now. If I just stay on top of macro, stay on top of upgrades, I can devise an insanely strong 2-2 Tommy to deny his 4th base if I keep my whole army alive. So that's exactly what Thorzain's going to do, right? If he doesn't lose too many units, it's going to be very hard for Killer to stop a 2-2 Tommy at a 4th base, wherever it is, right? So it's on Killer to do some damage here with the useless harass, and that's exactly what he's trying to do. So and it's on the Thorzain to try to not lose too many units. So we're going to fast forward through here. And this is the one thing where we talk about harassment, right? So for Killer, because he's behind, harassment, he wants to do it. Because there's always a certain risk in harassment, right? You might screw up your micro and lose some mulis. Your opponent might really, catch you in a bad position when you try to mulis harass. You might lose some units. Like, for example, Thorzain here. He's harassing with these Hellions or trying to move out. He just lost them for nothing, right? Anytime you harass, there's a risk associated with it. And so if you're ahead like Thorzain, you want to minimize your harassing efforts, because the less you harass, the less unnecessary risk you have. You're not going to lose any units as long as you don't harass. For Killer, though, he wants to harass enemy lists. That's exactly what he's been doing. He was trying to find angles to poke in there up until there was missile turrets, because he says, I need to make something happen to catch back up on the game. So that's exactly what you want to do for Thorzain. This drop here, oops, where'd it go? This drop here, I don't know. It's nice to do drop play, and it may be a plus EV move. Like your expected return is better than the risk. But when you're ahead, you want to play risk adverse. And so doing a drop here where, maybe you kill 2 drones isn't going to be the best trade, right? Because what you really want to do is you want to have all your units here because you're ahead. And all you have to do is deny, of course, their 4th base, and you're going to compound that advantage. Especially because right now, Thorzain's at 2-2, and Killer's only at 1-1. So this is a perfect timing for him. Ideally, he might have his whole army here, but even without his whole army, he can still trade very well with Great Micro as long as he just makes sure to deny his 4th base before the Zerg can catch up on upgrades or get set up. Now, from a Zerg point of view, you're talking about a Terran who, at this point in the game, he's got 6 Widow Mines. It's not an insane amount, but actually he's got like 9 now. He's got a lot of Widow Mines, right? This early push having 8, 9 Widow Mines is a very high Widow Mine count. In fact, we can see he's actually going to progress into mass Widow Mines with 1, 2, 3 factory production. So this is where we're actually going to back this up a second, talk about how to deal with Widow Mines very well. So as a Zerg player, what Widow Mines are good at, right? We're actually going to put this and watch it forward. What Widow Mines are very good at is if too many units clump up all around a single Widow Mine, right? Then that Widow Mine will get a lot of kills. So in this situation right here where Thorzain is, we can see if the Zerg tries to come up this force, their units will come up here and these Widow Mines will get a lot of kills. But what's really awesome is that's where you got a flank. We can see here Killer over the top. The flank with the Zerglings distracted a lot of Thorzain's units. And so the more angles you hit from, the lesser units will be clumped up, the less effective those Widow Mines are. And that's what's super important dealing with the mass Widow Mine Terran player. Strike from multiple angles. It can be tricky. And in fact, some of the pros are good if they can strike from one angle and crazy split all the units, knowing which ones the Widow Mines will go after and minimize damage that way. But if you're not insanely confident in your baning and speeding splits, what you want to do is keep your units spread out. So you have some in the front and then some further back, right? You don't have them all clumped up in the front charging in. And then try different multiple angles, and you really reduce the damage as Widow Mines do. And if you take those good engagements, you can be like Killer, push him off, save your 4th base, and now all of a sudden it's an equal game, right? Because he made that great defense there. So going forward, of course, equal game doesn't mean he's won. Widow Mines are still being annoying. But now it's going to come to another test, because typically if Terrans go Widow Mines, you're going to keep putting continual pressure, right? And if they don't have Widow Mines, of course, the standard speeding, baning, Mutas Force can do fine. Just sending units and do what you want. But as the Widow Mine count grows, right, you can see here, as there's more and more of these guys start coming down here, that's when the micro gets a lot trickier. So the 2 things you want to do is 1, attack from multiple angles if possible. And then 2, what's also important, is if Widow Mines are very clumped together, that's when you can send a few more speedings at once to try to deactivate multiple Widow Mines in a single blow. But charging up a ramp against this many Widow Mines is never a great idea, right? You can skirmish a bit to try to deactivate a few. But if you actually want to crush the whole army, you have to do exactly what Killers do when you see this. He sends a squad around the back, and then when he strikes, right, he strikes in the front and the back at the same time. And especially great that he was able to catch all these Widow Mines with their burrowed all in the same zone, where the Banans get the great hits, and the Widow Mines minimize the splash damage because they're all going to hit in the same area, which means you're going to be overkilling a lot with your splash damage. And also you get that great battle win like here. Now going forward, of course, Killer, now he's got Ultra's tech. He's shortly going to equalize the upgrades. And Thorzain's 4th is very slow because he was committing to the 9 to 4th base. And he hasn't really been able to do so. In fact, the game goes on for 10 minutes. We'll just pause it here because the game's over, right? I mean, it's not 100% over. That's why Thorzain doesn't leave. It's not like he can't win from here. But with a 50 supply difference and a Zerg on Hive Tech against a Terran who hasn't taken their 4th yet, it's going to be very, very difficult for the Terran to win from there, given that supply gap. It's going to be hard for him to establish a 4th base. That's exactly what happens. Killer just never doesn't take a 4th base and wins the game. So what's very important about that, we're really determined the game. Thorzain had the advantage at the start from the way the builds worked out, but he took a couple unnecessary risks. He lost a dropship full of guys for not too much. He lost a couple Hellions, and on the right side, I think he lost about 8 to 10 Marines, just throwing them out there. And losing those units without the army advantage he had from the start of the game, from being ahead, Once he loses that advantage, it makes it much harder to play the very easy win. The easy win when you're ahead is always take an expansion, deny your opponent's expansion, and get more ahead, right? But if you lose too many units unnecessarily, then you can't take that easy win of just denying their expansion and being way ahead in macro. So because he couldn't do that, all of a sudden it came down to the engagement positioning. And that's where Killer really killed it. Great flanks there. If you're a Zerg up against Terrans using Widow Mines, if you can set up a great flank like that, it's going to be amazing because Terran really wants to kite backwards to let the Widow Mines do their thing. And if you hit from 2 strikes, the bio can't kite backwards, collapsing on both from 2 sides, so you'll get some great cost efficiency there. So that wraps up the analysis on game number 3 between Thorzain and Killer. We'll take a short break and be right on to game number 4.